a few minutes, but before we do, I do need to give some introduction. This session is going to be all about negotiating your first salary after you leave here. We'll talk a little bit about job search more generally as well, but the main focus is on building out your negotiation skills, which I look forward to helping you to do. And following the session, I will say that those of you that need additional or supportive counseling as you go into the job negotiations, I'm available offline to do that. I'm going to share my screen. The slides that I'm going to share with you are also something that I'll send to you afterwards. But for now, like I always do, I like to begin with a land acknowledgement. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where Waltham and the surrounding communities now stand, the Nipmuc, Paquanaket, Wampanoag, and Massachusetts, Mataskit, Natick, Pokanog, and Namaskit people. I pay respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. What we're going to do is I'm going to introduce you to some very simple negotiation principles relatively quickly, and then I'm going to be sending you simulation materials, which you will be using to prepare for this negotiation, and you'll have some time to prepare with others who have the same role that you do, as well as some negotiations that will be with people who have the opposite role of yours. And so, some of you may have done simulation exercises like this before, which is great. But if you haven't, we'll also be giving you some coaching on how to do that. But essentially, the underlying principle is one of learning by doing. So with that in mind, let me first just take you into some basic negotiations principles. We divide processes and issues into those that are more distributive, dividing the pie, if you will, versus those that are more integrative, expanding the pie. Some people view it as value claiming or value creating, or forcing and fostering. Of course, there's always the option to escape, to not have a negotiated agreement. But the basic concept, which was going to be relevant for today's exercise, is this is in terms of buyers and sellers, but it could be recruiters and students, which is what we'll be doing. But generally, a party has their aspirations, their target point, and then the resistance point at which they won't go further. And if the points don't overlap, there's no ZOPA, zone of possible agreement. And then you must go to your BATNA, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So everyone comes in, but you know your resistance point, you don't know the others. And so you, through exchange, discover whether there's a zone of possible agreement. Simply put, one pie can have higher value versus the other, but when you create value, you move the Pareto frontier out so both sides can be better off. And that's just in terms of positions, but it's not all about positions. It's also about what's unstated, but the lower part of the iceberg, which are your interests, your needs, your concerns, your hopes and fears, your quality.
I'm in the middle of a meeting.
Oh, somebody needs to mute.
Yes.
Various things that are under the surface.
Yes.
But let me pause.
Yeah, I don't know what time it is.
Whoever's talking, can you mute?
Okay, 1:30 I can do.
Jasmine, do you want to mute for a minute? Thank you. Let me just ask a quick question. Here's the statement. You were supposed to train me 2 months ago to use the computerized ordering system to order supplies. What might be going on for this person? We know their position, which is you were supposed to train me and it didn't happen. But let me just open it up. What are some hypotheticals about the underlying interest that this person has? What could be going on? Anybody?
Are you talking about the interest of the supervisor or the person who hasn't gotten the training?
The team member.
One interest could be obtaining skills for a future employment or for the current employment.
So they might want to obtain skills because it helps them be able to grow on the job. Good. What else could be going on?
The team member may be feeling sidelined and pretty not useful for the facility.
Okay, they might be feeling like they're not getting opportunities and getting sidelined. Good. What else could be going on?
I would also say a lack of support, because it sounds like it could be something that's listed as a basic job duty. And maybe they're expected to be doing this, but didn't receive the training to be performing in that area well.
So it could be that they're being held accountable and they're saying, it's not my fault, you didn't train me. So you heard 3 different interests that could be going on. How would you know which one it is? Anybody? Is it obvious from the statement? How would you know?
You probably only know unless you have a conversation about it.
Exactly. When you hear a statement from somebody and they state a position, you don't know the underlying interest unless you ask. So you have to say, help me to understand why that's important to you. Help me to know what's going on. What's essentially part of this process of getting past positions is to understand underlying interest. Because if you just take the 2 positions, there's a limited range of agreement. But if you understand the interest, there you can often identify additional options that are relevant. And the thing is, if people have a fixed pie mindset, you can be stuck in a limited conversation versus something that involves information exchange and problem solving. So that's just a little bit of background on negotiations principles.
Yes.
This has provided me with relevant skills, which I know would be useful at BioInnovate.
Yes. So where precisely do you think you might fit in your MBA? I wanted to know more about the financial aspect of your MBA, how much you did there.
Oh, okay.
How much? Yeah.
Yeah, I noted. I noted there's the strategic planning session responsible for mergers and acquisition. May seem to be a good fit. May seem to be a good fit for me. This is because it's I would have skills. I present skills and I present skills in margin and acquisitions, which could drive the firm, which could build the firm forward in getting in their future mergers and acquisitions.
Yes, I would just. So, what's the relationship between that and your studies at Hela? Yeah, how does that?
I mean, yeah, I don't know.
So we came to no agreement in the end.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. How long did we have? I'm sorry, Jasmine. How long did we have to discuss? Was it 15 minutes or like less?
So what I can say is I can't answer that question, but what I can say is that I've been skipping around and other people are actively engaged in conversing. So
okay.
you know, I would love to know sort of how you 2 got to, you know,
I think we can keep
the
going.
point you got to.
I think we
Yeah,
can
I
keep
think
going.
it's just hard because we didn't know that we weren't given the job role that we were applying for.
Okay.
And the first question was make a pitch for why we should be hired, but we don't know the job role. So I don't know the skills or the competencies that I would be doing. So it's really hard for me to do a pitch for a job that I don't know what I'm applying for. And then on our side, we were given, you could be considered for one of 3 roles. One is strategic planning, one is CSR, and one is DE&I. And then Joel told us to draw on our own experiences and expertise. And then Fabiola, so I was like, well, out of those 3, I'm most interested in CSR. Then Fabiola's paper tells her, well,
Yeah, that
actually, we're
my
only interested in strategic planning. So I'm
yeah,
like,
that's the
well,
greatest need that we have. But I guess
and
I
I'm
can
like,
twirl it around so I can make it interesting as well.
no,
I
it's
mean,
fine. I think we
I can keep going.
going. No, it's hard for me to make a pitch for something I have no experience in, and I don't have the job in front of me, so I don't know what I'm pitching.
Yep.
And also, like, for me, and I don't know if either of you, I know Fabiola, you work in the career center, I think, but like for me, the actual number is less important than the fit, right? If you find a really good organization that's going to be a good fit for you, you feel like you're going to be really utilized, or your skills could be really relevant. So then it's hard for me to turn it around when you ask for a number when I don't feel like the fit would be there. So I just don't know how to approach like giving a number. But I mean, I kind of said that. I just don't know if that's what you wanted to hear as the employer, which is like, I'm flexible as long as the fit's there.
Honestly, I don't I don't know. Do you want to keep going? Because I mean,
Well, I want it to be helpful practice for you. So what do you think would be the most helpful at this point?
So, like, as an employer, we have our greatest need in my paper is we need somebody for strategic planning when it comes to like potential mergers and acquisitions. However, we do have an option for you to, like, if you were to join the company, for you to work in CSR and for you to work with patient advocacy groups as well. However, that would have to involve relocation to San Francisco. And obviously then I would tell you that the company pays for half of the relocation or costs. I don't know how usual that is here in the US because I'm not from here. Also, and then I would tell you the expected yearly salary that we would give you as a candidate. And then I'm guessing from that you would think, okay, so I'm moving to San Francisco and they're offering me this salary. Is it feasible? Is it sorry, somebody just walked in.
It's okay.
Yeah, and you would think like if it's feasible, blah blah blah, and then you would like do your counter argument saying, okay, this yearly salary, you think it's okay, or if you think it's not, and if you think it's not, you would give me your counter argument of how much you're proposing.
Yeah. No, I think that's helpful. So our paper we're given, we have a different offer at another company, but it's in a field that's unrelated. So it's hard for me to know how much it's worthwhile even mentioning that salary or using that salary as a basis for a different sector's negotiation, because it seems like they wouldn't be that. I mean, you as a candidate, you want to get the best offer, but at the same time, you don't want your expectations to be unmatchable, if that makes any sense. So I'm not sure how helpful it is to have a different sector salary.
Can I so if I could just quickly jump in terms of negotiation, and this, this session is being run by Joel. So I defer to what he's trying to do. But what I would say as a career development professional is that the commonality is you, the candidate, right? So it's about leveraging what you bring to the table. So for instance, if you are you just MBA or MBA MPP?
MBA. Just MBA, yeah.
So as an MBA, and however many years of experience you had before that, what you're thinking about is, what do I have to offer company A, and what do I have to offer company B? And so instead of thinking about a number that would be good for both organizations, you're thinking about the number relative to the work based on what you're bringing. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So like you might
Yeah.
have two different numbers, because you might have, okay, so 2 more minutes. You might have lots of experience in strategic planning, even though you don't want to do it, right? So then you would propose a number, and then they would say yes or no. And if you choose to leverage that, you can, but like that's the exercise, right? Is to take what you have and what they're looking for and figure out an appropriate number.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Mhm.
So that instead of trying to compare the two organizations, you're trying to assess your value within the organization.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm sure
Should
that
we leave the breakout room, or should we just like wait until it's finished?
no, why don't you can leave.
Yeah, I
Yes,
made a
we
deal. I did.
Okay,
But I
good.
wish, yeah, I didn't really go through the material, so it was a bit difficult, like trying to negotiate
Of
blindly.
course.
Exactly the same for me,
Yeah.
you know.
So, and we'll talk about that and everything else in a minute. We have another minute or two before everyone is back. But I commend you all for beginning the job offer conversation. So it sounds like we have one case where an offer was made. How about Fabiola? Did an offer get made in your case?
No.
Okay.
She rejected the position basically.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about that. But welcome back, everybody. Let me say a little bit about the situation. We're going to go over by about 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 5, because I want to do justice to the conversations that you had. In this negotiation, the employer had another person who was willing to come work from Tufts at a lower wage. The employee had another job offer at $72,000 that was sitting, but it was, of course, with a big chemical company, which they might or might not want to work with. And what you had to discover, since you both had a good BATNA or a best alternative, what you discovered was whether a job offer was getting made. Raise your hand or use the hand raise to tell me if an offer was made and if it was accepted. So we have one group that did. So an employer got an employee and an employee got a job. How about the rest of you? The rest of you know. Oh,
We're still negotiating.
We're still negotiating. Okay, well, that's good. The situation is that, first of all, let's unpack this in a couple of ways. How many felt that they made a good elevator pitch to start the session? If you were the employer, give me a thumbs up or a brief appreciation for the employee if you felt they made an elevator pitch that you liked. So tell us what you liked. Hillary?
Well, that's me, right?
Oh, Jai, go ahead.
Yes, I think Kingsley knows what he wants. He was very ready.
Okay, good. So having an elevator pitch makes a big difference to start with. Yeah. I noticed that many of you tripped up on the salary issue. And let me say that as an employer, you do have to stay within your range, but you can usually offer even more for moving costs or signing bonus, because those are one-time offers that don't go into the base wage. So even though you were constrained in what you had, if you had to, doing the one-time sweeteners gives you more leverage. Let's hear from a couple of employers. How did it feel being on the employer side, deciding whether to hire somebody? What did you notice?
It was fun.
It's fun. You're in charge.
Better to be on that side.
Good.
Yeah. And it was challenging at the same time because I have somebody that I really want, but then I can't afford to have the person. So we have to go like back and forth a lot of times to be able to, reach a balance.
And by the way, if you go over your range a little bit, but you get a great candidate, your boss will probably say, good job. Whereas if you come back empty-handed, they will say, why didn't you get the talent that we needed? So that's the employer side. How about on the employee side? How did it feel, in a sense, negotiating over your job after graduation? What did you notice?
For me, it was it was good I had an offer because it's not really easy being in a position where you get to keep negotiate with the employer. But having a previous offer seemed like the baseline where I could start from. And
yeah, in your case, the offer was way low. It was $50,000, right?
Yes, it was 60,000. It was lower.
60.
Yeah.
It was 60. And clearly having an offer in hand of 72, even if it's not your first choice as an employer, that was a big gap. And you might choose to go with your best alternative.
Yes.
But the important thing is that there's a certain point at which the power shifts. Once the offer has been made, now it's up to you to decide whether it's an offer that you can accept. And so suddenly you go from hoping to get a job offer to being talent and discovering whether it's an offer that you're willing to accept. What else did you notice, taking out of your roles for a minute? I know we're over time, so I'm just going to take another minute or two. Just as you looked at this whole dynamic, what are your takeaways from doing a salary negotiation? What did you observe in the dynamics? And by the way, I apologize for the materials complications. I had everyone's email address that had signed up, and almost none of the people that signed up are here. And most of you, I didn't have your email addresses, so we had to do that in real time. And that, of course, cost us time. So I apologize for that. But as you think back to even this brief negotiated interaction, what did you notice? What are your takeaways? What can we learn from your experience here?
I think.
Oh, go ahead, Jad.
I think that the applicant needs to be very careful about giving in too quickly. He asked for 72. I offered 60. I expected him to ask for more. Secondly, for the what's it called, the sign-on fee, I was ready to give more, and he was asking for like less than 10% of what I could give him. So maybe you need to be.
So on the one hand, you came in with much too low an offer, and he was ready to walk away because he was offended, and he had a better alternative. But on the other hand, what you had room to negotiate, and most people don't realize that employers always start lower than they're going to be. Sometimes you really do hit the high end of their range. And one hint that I can give you is if you truly can't get any more movement, in addition to the one-time things like a signing bonus and moving cost, you can also ask for a review in 6 months. Your salary will always go up after a review. And so doing an accelerated review rather than waiting a year gives you a chance to make up for what they can't do at that time. But as soon as you're in that back and forth, one of the most important things is to ask questions. Help me to know what your range is. Help me to know how much you can do on a signing bonus, rather than just assuming it's the position and that's it. Good. What else did you notice or observe? Or what questions do you have about this whole process?
I want to ask, what are some of the other ways that you can know how much on an average people like that, or maybe people in the company take for such a position or elsewhere, that should give you an idea about the baseline of whichever job you are going into, so you don't start too low or start too high?
Yeah, if you start too low, you get what's called the winner's curse, in which they say great, and then you worry that you maybe started too low. Glassdoor sometimes will post salaries, but it's hard to get good information. The the most important thing is in the interview is to ask questions. Help me to know what your range is. Help me to know if I were to come and discover that others were being paid differently than myself, that wouldn't be good. Help me to know that that what would be appropriate for people coming in with credentials and experience like I have. So you want to ask questions, and before you talk numbers, there's a dance. Whoever puts a number on the table first, that's the anchor. That's how the conversation gets anchored. But before you mention a number, you want to at least ask a few questions. If you're the employer, to know what the candidate's alternatives are. If you're the candidate, to know what the employer's alternatives are. Just as a side note, yeah.
I just had a question, but you can continue your
Oh,
thought.
no, go ahead, Molly.
From the employee side, do you have any tips on figuring out what your range should be? So for instance, all of us are coming out of time where we have not been in the job market. The typical math would be I was making X before I added $30,000 in human capital through my education. So now I have X plus 30,000, but that might be unrealistic. That might not be, that might not be a good measure of how these skills that I've gained would fare in the job market. And then also it's kind of difficult because, you could use similar jobs or positions, but at the same time, it's hard to know what you qualify for because they tell you to apply for jobs even if you're not 100% qualified. But it's sort of like, well, does that mean 60%? Does that mean 80%? So from an employee, I don't even know how to go about knowing what I should be offering for a salary range. Do you have any tips?
Yeah, I have a couple tips. First of all, it's a great question. The first thing is that if you're a Heller student coming out onto the job market, the range of employers that you're interested in could be very broad. So if you go to a small nonprofit, the salary range is probably going to be lower in the 60 to 70,000 range. If you go into a large corporation that has social impact work, you could be coming in over $100,000. So the first thing is, what is the range that's matched to the kind of organization and job that you're applying for? The second thing is to, if you can, to do some networking. And I will say something to all of you, and Jasmine, I'm sure, will reinforce this. Something on the order of 60 to 70% of jobs do not happen through postings, but through social networks. And so before you graduate, you should be doing at least 10 or 15, ideally 20 informational interviews. That is, find somebody who's doing the work that you want to do in 3 to 5 years and reach out to that person. And then after you do a half an hour informational interview, ask for 2 more names and begin to network with others. Because when you build that network, coming back, Molly, those are then people that you can say, in this industry, what is the salary range that's reasonable that I could expect? Because Glassdoor will only tell you so much, as will other online systems. But if you have built out your network of people, then you can ask the real question. And by the way, if you do informational interviews, if you do 5 or 10 or 15, one of them will be hiring. And suddenly it's a job offer, it's a job interview, not just an informational interview. But what I'm going to do, I now have the emails, I think, of everybody who is here. And the Drucker Institute does a rating of the top 250 corporations in the world, and it rates them on 7 dimensions, one of which is social impact. And so there's a lot of social impact NGOs that you may be interested in, but you may not know about other corporations, North Face, companies that you might not have on your radar screen, but that might be doing work for which a Heller graduate would be ideal. So everyone who's here, if I have your emails, I will send you that information, as well as a listing of some of the top NGOs in the space. But for the most part, the most important work to be done is to network and build out the ability to ask. But in the interview, if you don't have the information, the most important skill is to ask really good questions. Because oftentimes if you ask, well, what is the range? And by the way, I have a master's degree, I have this years of experience, so I want to make sure the range that's appropriate for someone with my credentials.
Thanks so much, Joel. This was a wonderful session. I think everyone learned quite a bit. I just want to remind you of a couple things. First and foremost, November is for networking, and this is one of the events that we have in that series. I can't echo enough Joel's statement that jobs start with networking. And I kind of, my tagline is the career ambitions always start with networking. And so this might feel like the end of the process, but networking sort of sprinkles throughout. The second thing, I want to point you to the information that I posted on the chat about NACE. The NACE salary calculator is a tool. As Joel said, it is only part of the answer because they don't necessarily know all of the attributes that you have, and you're bringing your whole self to the job market. And then the third thing is that my colleague Brian Canny and I are here to help you with this. We do one-on-one sessions, and we are available 5 days a week, and are happy to do Zoom and in-person interviews. And I think what I found is that is the best way to talk about a specific opportunity. I've worked with a number of students already this year, and 100% of them have come back with higher salaries than they started with for the offer. So you have, in addition to Joel, lots of resources, including my office.
I can't emphasize that enough. Thank you. So take good care and call on us as needed.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Take good care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take good care.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good
Joel.
session.